Zach, it's great to have you here on the road to autonomy. We've been following the robotic delivery market quite a bit. Your company, Coco Robotics, you're a big part of that market. In your opinion, what is the current state of the robotic delivery market?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Been watching the show for a while. Uh, it's having a it's having a really interesting moment right now. I think you're getting the convergence of a couple things, which you guys cover extensively. It's the technology, like the AI technology, is clearly ready and starting to make an impact in the world. You first saw that with ChatGPT and all the LLM race, but then that's now translated into the physical world quite a bit. I mean, Waymo went from a couple test vehicles to now it seems like they're everywhere and you can actually ride in it, right? So I think for a lot of people, customers, restaurants, merchants, and then our platform partners, I think autonomy became very real all of a sudden. Um, and I think that's happened at a point where these companies are being very thoughtful of consumer spending and affordability. And then on top of that, you have a lot of kind of interesting labor headwinds right now. Like a lot of Europe's reclassifying drivers to go from gig workers to employees. We obviously have something similar to that in California, New York with Prop 22 and some of the minimum pay guarantee. So you have a lot of pressure on price that's going to drive price up at a time where everyone's a little bit more sensitive to cost. So I think there's both a need for some sort of automated solution, and clearly the technology is ready. So I think this has just jumped the top priority list for a lot of these companies. And you know, it's hard to predict when these things will happen, but we're here and ready. And so it's been a really cool year as this has become a lot more real to people.
The technology has become very real despite the reports. I don't buy it because I look at real world data. The consumer is hurting. The consumer is cutting back on spending. If you look at New York Federal Reserve data, the amount of debt they're holding on credit cards is at an all-time high. The consumers are clearly scared, and so they are turning to more cost-effective solutions, and that's what autonomy is enabling, especially in the delivery market. The other aspect that I believe is driving the growth of the market here is tipping fatigue. Everywhere you go and buy a coffee. Oh, I want a tip. What do you mean? What did you do? I picked up at the counter. Is tipping fatigue starting to help accelerate your market because a robot you don't tip?
Yeah, I think it's a good benefit to offer customers, right? When you order on Uber Eats or DoorDash or one of these platforms, you will get the option: do you want an autonomous vehicle or do you want a human courier? And if you opt into autonomous vehicles, that's one of the things that's marketed to you is no tip, or your tip gets refunded if you get matched with an AV. I think it's a huge bonus, right? I mean, the way these fees work is they all kind of stack up. So you have the subtotal, the actual goods, then it's inflated to account for the commissions that are being charged to the restaurant, right? So they have a $10 meal item, they mark it up to $13. Then you get sales tax, then you get the delivery fees, then you get the service fees, then you get the tip. The tip's often calculated on that total. So, you're paying 15, 20% on top of all of those other fees. So it gets super expensive. And obviously you want to tip your driver, especially, if it's bad weather outside or whatever the conditions might be. And you often won't get your delivery if you don't tip the driver for obvious reasons. It's a huge part of the earnings for the driver, right? The driver needs that tip to make it worth their time. So it's a tough problem. I think so. That's a huge promise of autonomy is we can obviously make this much more affordable for people. And if you do that, people will order much more frequently. I think a broader set of people can actually benefit from the convenience of delivery. I mean, clearly delivery is incredibly convenient and people want to do it even if it's incredibly expensive. So I think making that more affordable is going to be really good.
Because if you look at it's fees on top of fees on top of fees. So you order, say, you're based in LA, you order a $12 burrito. Next thing you know, it's 22 bucks. You're like, what the heck? How did this happen? This is not worth it. That has to change. These companies have to streamline their fees. Autonomy is a way that can help them potentially streamline their fees. But let's not forget, once you get addicted to fees, you don't go back. It's like a junkie on heroin. Once they get addicted, they're not going back, unfortunately. So that's the fee aspect of your business. Another aspect of your business, which I'd love to get your take on and how fast it's growing, is advertising. Because your vehicles are, for all practical purposes, rolling billboards. How big is your advertising business today, and how big do you see it eventually growing?
We started the ads business about a year ago. We had a lot of inbound for it. People ask about it all the time. We just didn't really focus on it. And then we did a couple campaigns. We did the first one with Fox for the Grimsburg TV show. We put kind of a square wrap vinyl ad on the side of the vehicles. That worked pretty well. Collected some data. We both integrated the GPS to third party trackers and did pedestrian counts from the cameras, so we could give a pretty accurate kind of engagement metric, or justify a CPM to people. We didn't know. We just kind of made up a price and figured it out along the way. Turns out we get a ton of impressions from these vehicles. They're in the busiest parts of the city, and they're out pretty much 24 hours a day. So you do get a ton of impressions. So we've iterated on the model quite a bit. We did a campaign with Sony recently. We just finished one with Netflix for the Electric State movie. That one was awesome. If you saw that we had these, yellow full wrapped Electric State, which is about robots. So it was kind of perfect. But it's been a great business model. I mean, I think it's kind of like it's very interactive, engaging out of home, right? You have billboards, you have bus wraps, but robots are novel. Everyone films them. They always end up on TikTok and Instagram posts. You get a lot of indirect impressions that way, but it's a really cool experience, and it's a cool way to bring the ad to life for people. We offer this thing we call stunts, which is where you could have a premiere in Hollywood, and we will pull all the Hollywood vehicles for 10 minutes, and they'll come swarm the event, and it becomes this kind of viral moment, and then they'll go back to doing deliveries. That kind of stuff's really cool because you can create a very experiential type of marketing campaign around it. Wherever people are having events, usually we have tens of vehicles anyways, right? I think we have probably 40 or 50 vehicles in Hollywood, so they could just swarm around the premiere, which is pretty cool. So it's a growing part of our business. It's obviously great margins for a delivery company. As all the delivery companies have figured out, advertising is a pretty important component. But I do think it's going to become, I think it's actually a really valuable form of advertising, especially as you start getting a lot of disruption in the digital channels right now, and how this all unfolds with AI and the chatbot interface. I think this is going to be a really strong and really durable form of advertising.
It is. This is tangible. The consumer can see it, and you have those viral moments that get picked up quite a bit, and your advertisers aren't paying extra for that, so that's a benefit for them. Is the largest advertising base, is that the film studios, the media companies? Is that your largest advertising base today?
We've worked with others, and we will continue to work with others. It was the most natural, organic thing for us to do, being around all the studios in Los Angeles. And they're promoting a show or a movie, so it's usually like a big event that they want to have kind of appear everywhere before the premiere. So that was just the natural place to start. But we're certainly working on more categories.
Do you see a path where your advertising revenue becomes larger than your delivery revenue?
I don't know. We'll see. I think kind of what I was saying about the AI chatbot world, it'll be really interesting to see where this goes. Because, I mean, those ad dollars still have to get placed, right? So if ChatGPT is not going to monetize them for search, or it's not going to monetize as well, or is the same way, and these AI chatbots have the balancing act of, they want to represent truthfulness in a way that a Google list of blue links doesn't exactly have to do. This be relevance, but if the AI is supposed to represent truthfulness, it's tough to incorporate an ad into that flow directly. I mean, there's a bunch of ways they'll do it, and I'm sure they'll figure that out. But those same ad dollars have to get placed somewhere, and so the CPMS will just go way up on most of these traditional digital channels if that happens. So then out of home might be a very, very durable way to do this. So we'll see. I think there's a really cool world where we monetize the advertising and the size of the vehicles, and that allows us to offer a much cheaper service than we would be able to do previously. So I think that could be really interesting, and that could really benefit consumers and merchants, and that can grow volumes. And I think all of that is like net beneficial to the company. So we'll see how it shapes out.
And as you grow, do you see different potential form factors for your delivery robots emerging in the future?
So what we're designing at Coco is we're trying to build the perfect vehicle for urban goods delivery. So you have the kind of a Waymo or a car type vehicle. That is not the best form factor to move things around a city, right? There's a reason that most cities deliver things with bicycle couriers. So you can think of us as building an autonomous bike courier. That's in the short to medium term, that is our North Star on the hardware. How do we use bike lanes, shoulders of roads, sidewalks? How do we kind of get to that 10, 15 miles an hour, but still be able to fit safely and appropriately on the city sidewalks? that is the kind of ultimate design goal. And that's really important for our merchants because you want to be able to get right up to the door of the restaurant or the side window or the back alley or wherever they want to put the food into the robot. We can fit 20 of these in a single parking space. So if you have a merchant that does 100 orders an hour at peak, that's really tough to do in a city if you have a larger vehicle. And the vehicle's big enough to fit, 99% of orders. You can fit like 40 bowls, like a Sweetgreen bowl or some sort of bowl in it. You can fit 10 extra large pizzas. We can fit 4 grocery bags. So it is large enough capacity-wise to deliver most of the things people get delivered. It's super convenient for the merchants because it's small and can fit on the sidewalks, can handle high volume, super high throughput, and then it can get right up close to the customer. The customer doesn't have to come out and try to walk a couple of minutes to find wherever the vehicle was able to pull over. But you still want to be able to get off the sidewalk to get higher speeds so you can deliver further and you can deliver faster, right? Going faster is always going to be a good thing. But you can imagine a place like New York or downtown Chicago or Miami these days has a ton of traffic. A car is not actually the best way to get around that city, in particular if you're delivering goods.
There's some scenarios where in New York, I don't take a car. I walk everywhere. Downtown Miami and Brickell, I've gotten out of Ubers and just walked because it just takes so long. There's so much congestion.
It's gotten pretty bad.
It's horrible. I don't like traffic. I like to walk. But in the summer, it's hotter than hot. But I still rather walk than sitting in the car getting frustrated and, as somebody says, doom scrolling, because that's what you do when you're bored in a car. It's annoying. Hypothetically, you're at a merchant. Let's just use a restaurant for an example, and there's 20 of your Coco bots lined up in one parking spot. How does the individual loading those bots know which one to go to put what delivery into what bot?
Yeah, we have a first order ready, first order out flow for merchants that do that kind of volume. So you can think of it kind of becomes like a taxi line. So they can actually assign any robot to the order. We actually have this example. There's this merchant called Main Chick Hot Chicken. They operate out of a ghost kitchen in West LA. They're super consistent on their prep times. So, the amount of time it takes them to get the food ready and bagged. And that's really quick. And that's the only thing they make is these, spicy chicken sandwiches. And they're really good and they're really consistent at making them. So we did an experiment with them. We said, okay, if any order is eligible for robot delivery, why don't you prep it first? So you basically pop it to the top of the queue. And because we are ready and available, they do so much volume, they have a whole fleet of vehicles sitting there. And that actually was able to cut down the delivery time for the customer dramatically because the second the order is ready, it went into a robot and the robot was off to the customer. And I don't know, that's 15, 20 minutes assigning a driver, having the driver park, having the driver come over and look for their order. They might be picking up 2 orders. They might be using 2 apps at the same time. And so this can save, 15 minutes there, right? So obviously if it's a 3-mile delivery, we're going to start losing that advantage because we're slower than a car. And Los Angeles is a lot of car-based delivery. But if the delivery is going a mile, we're going to be way faster, 1.5 miles. We're going to be way faster than a human in a car. So that's something really cool we've worked on with these higher volume merchants. That flow doesn't make sense for 99% of restaurants, but if you do hundreds of orders a day, that's been the best flow, both for the merchant experience and for the customer experience.
What is your average delivery length? Is it under 3 miles, 1.5 miles? What does that look like for your average distance?
It's about 1.5 miles. We deliver up to 2 miles travel distance. So the average delivery is a little over 1 mile. It depends. All the cities are different, right? You have like Miami and Chicago are a little bit denser than Los Angeles. Helsinki's very dense. Helsinki's not even, Helsinki's like low density for a European city, but still it's Europe, and Europe's just built way denser than most of the United States. So, almost every single delivery in Helsinki's within a few miles.
In Helsinki, that you did that through a partnership with DoorDash, and as part of that partnership, you successfully completed 100,000 deliveries. That's really impressive. How did you do it, and how did the partnership with DoorDash come together? Because eventually that partnership, you exported from Helsinki to the United States, where you're now going to Chicago with DoorDash.
Yeah, so we're in Chicago, Miami, Los Angeles, and Helsinki with DoorDash. They've been a great partner. We partner with both them and Wolt, which is their kind of European brand now. They're based in Helsinki, so that's why we started in Helsinki. Helsinki was their first European market because that's where the Wolt team's headquartered. And at first I wasn't really expecting to go to Helsinki as the first European launch. Everyone always asks me, why did you start in Helsinki? Helsinki is actually really great in a lot of ways I didn't expect. The infrastructure is perfect. The bike lanes are on the sidewalks. The sidewalks are like 10 feet wide. So traversing the city as a pedestrian or a cyclist is 10 out of 10. And that's one thing we care a lot about. And the weather in Helsinki also makes it so that in the winter, everyone wants to get everything delivered because it's dark all day, it's cold, it's like negative 15 degrees, and it's snow everywhere and ice. Like nobody wants to go outside, even if all the restaurants are like 3 blocks away. Nobody wants to leave their house. And so, but at the same time, couriers do not want to be on the roads. It's mostly bike couriers. It's a very hard time to get drivers on the road, obviously, because it's miserable outside. So you kind of have this problem where when customers want it the most is also the times where it's hardest to get supply on the road. So we can offer a lot of value as an autonomous vehicle company to say, we can give you this fixed amount of supply. You can plan ahead and say, I want 10,000 supply hours every day guaranteed from 7 a.m. to 3 a.m. And we can guarantee that no matter what the weather conditions are. So the poor weather of Helsinki actually is a huge selling point to our customers. And then it forced us, coming from Los Angeles, to really develop the hardware to be able to handle super low temperatures, ice, snow, and that whole kind of workflow in those conditions.
You go from it hits 100 in LA, and if you Johnny Drama I remember he's going over the hill in the episode of Entourage, it's going higher, and it can get 120 in the valley. So that's one extreme temperature. Then Helsinki, you get minus 15 Fahrenheit, minus 20 Fahrenheit. How do you develop the packaging? So let's say in Helsinki, for example, I want my pizza warm, where in LA, you're delivering me ice cream, and I want my ice cream cold. I don't want to have melted cream. How do you build the packaging for these different environments?
We work with the brands. We have a kind of a generic robot layout where you get this insulated interior liner in the robot. There's also a cup holder attachment, so that can fold up or it can be folded down, so you can put drinks in it. That's the standard you get. Our average travel time's 15 minutes, so it's not in there for that long. That works pretty well, even in the harshest weather conditions. What we also offer merchants is you can separate hot and cold. So if you say, I want to deliver this pizza and I want this bottle of soda, or I'm delivering this pizza and a salad, the pizza will steam up the whole compartment and it will keep it very hot. So you don't want that. It will heat up the bottle of soda or the salad. So you can actually put that in a separated insulated bag. So we work with merchants to customize this. This is a huge selling point of using robots for delivery, is your guest will receive their order exactly as your staff puts it in. And we have a camera on the inside, so we can also help you with quality control to understand, are you putting it in there correctly, right? Are you stacking the heavy part of the ramen on the top and it spills all the time, right? If you're doing that with us, the same thing is going to happen with a driver. So we can actually do quality control on the best way to deliver that food. You can customize that experience too. We work with enterprise brands to really own that. So you can put your logo, your branding on it. You can say, I want a French fries compartment and a milkshake compartment. And so you can really go above and beyond and create that guest experience that's customized for you. And I think that's really cool. And that's something that's been totally lost in delivery. We used to do that when we had the local pizza delivery guy, right? It was like a staple of the neighborhood. He lived in the neighborhood. You'd invite him in, and the kids would run down and say, like, oh, the pizza man's here. Like, that doesn't happen anymore. And that was a huge part of the pizza delivery service, was that person was supposed to be part of the experience. And now everything's just kind of left at your doorstep because we've scaled that industry a lot. So I think this is a cool way to bring back that kind of human touch point and that hospitality, ironically through a robot. And I think that'll be really good for creating delightful experiences for the customers.
The pizza man was part of the culture. Everybody knew him. And then remember back in the day, the Domino's 20 minutes or less guaranteed, or it's free. And you hear these stories about all the crashes and all the different scenarios that happen there. That's pizza delivery. Pizza delivery's evolved. Now they leave it and they're not here 20 minutes or less. Thank you, trial lawyers, for ruining that experiment. But Domino's gained a ton of market share from Pizza Hut, and that's how it started. To give you a little background on that, Pizza Hut didn't offer delivery, but they guaranteed it within 15 minutes to pick it up. Domino's said, well, we'll deliver it within 20. Next thing you know, Pizza Hut goes into bankruptcy. Domino's scales a very, very large business. Can your robots pass the French fry test? When I order from a restaurant French fries, now you get them. They're soggy. They're horrible. Can your robots deliver the French fries when I bite into it? Ah, this is crispy. Can they do that?
So the way to think about it is our vehicle is going to be as good as possible at delivering the food based on how the merchant uses it. So if the merchant leaves the French fries in a bag, or they have them in a container inside the bag that doesn't let steam out, they're going to be soggy. The benefit of the robot is we can work with you to say what is the perfect packaging, what is the perfect way to do that. And that way we're kind of a consultant to the merchant, but at the end of the day, they are responsible for using the vehicle to their benefit, right? We get merchants that don't use the cup holders and they just put the drinks in there. It's like, that's, we'll give you that feedback, but you should use the cup holder, or you're gonna mix up the coffee and stuff. So we advise, and we have the camera data, so we can actually give them feedback. Which usually there's a kind of a mismatch between what the owner wants to do or the general manager wants to do, and what might be happening with the staff. The restaurant industry is tough; they're busy, you got high turnover. So we provide that data to the restaurant manager so they can kind of manage quality. But we're only going to be as good as the restaurant wants us to be. But we are very involved in that, and obviously, like, more enterprise customers take this stuff super seriously. But trying to give that same technology to the SMBs.
Yeah, I mean, to a restaurant, the restaurant's a brand. You have to have a consistent experience, whether it's in-house dining or out-of-house dining. You have to have a consistent experience, or your business over time will collapse. Because the restaurant business is a very finicky business. You have the partnership with DoorDash. You also have one with Uber Eats. Outside of those two partnerships, if the local restaurant, say the local burrito place, that I want to order burrito and I want to deliver it autonomously, how do I do that?
We work with Uber Eats, we work with DoorDash and Volt. We also work directly with merchant partners, so they can reach out to us through our website, or they call us, contact us in a number of ways, and then we'll assess if it makes sense. Right? They might want one vehicle that offers some sort of baseline capacity, and then they can kind of flex up and use drivers to kind of meet a higher volume of orders. You have enterprise restaurants that might only deliver a mile or two, and they want only robots for all of the orders. So both of those are fine. We'll work with them on what makes the most sense. The economics of those things are different, right? If you're using a robot that's just going to be busy 20 hours a day, that's very different than having enough robots to meet 7 p.m. peak. But fundamentally, the cost structure is way lower than having a staffed human driver, right? So if you want to offer that experience and you only want a robot delivery experience, you can do that. And we can kind of calibrate you on the price point based on our cost. So we have a couple partners doing that model where it's robot only, and it's a little bit different of a business, but our cost structure low enough, it can actually work.
Do you sell or lease those robots to those dedicated restaurants?
Yeah, it's kind of like a lease.
Wow. And so that's their fleet. Can they put their own advertising on it, or do they have to take your advertising?
They own the branding, they own the experience. We will build that fleet to do exactly what they want. We can customize the interior for them, the exterior, the sounds. You can you can brand it however you want. That should be an extension of your store.
Is that a growing business for you inside of Coco?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a large focus for us. It doesn't make a ton of sense for most businesses, but you do have high volume brands, and that makes a lot of sense, right? If you want to work directly with us and you're a small business that does one order a day or something like that, you can pull from the fleet. Like, we'll still fulfill that order for you, and it'll be a per delivery charge. We'll still work with you on your own channel, right? If you want to take in phone orders and then fulfill it with a robot, you can pull from you can pull from the fleet that's roaming around the city and deliver with that. But if you want to, like, really own and customize that experience, that's more of like an enterprise type model. Then it's more of a fleet lease, and you're responsible for the utilization of the vehicle, and we'll work through the kind of capacity planning with you and all of that. But yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be a huge business for the future, for these brands that really want to kind of take control of that experience.
From an operational standpoint, how does it work? Because you're operating a hybrid fleet where you're first remote driver and then autonomy as a fallback. So how does that operate from an operational standpoint?
Yeah, so I think every autonomous vehicle company has some sort of teleoperator, some sort of remote operator in the mix. What we did at Coco from the very beginning is we treated the teleoperator job. We call them pilots. We treated the job of a pilot as kind of a first class product inside of Coco. So we're very thoughtful about all the software on how do you dispatch the right pilot to the right order. How do I switch pilots between different countries or different cities? How do I very quickly present them all of the context? Where am I? What are the rules of the road? What should I watch out for? What state of the delivery am I on? What is needed for me? Like, why did the autopilot disengage? So you have to be really good at building all that. And we started saying we're going to be entirely teleoperated. So that product had to work really well because that did 100% of the deliveries. And then over time, the vehicles have been trained to be, a higher degree of autonomy. And then when we do have to involve an operator because we run into some sort of construction zone or some sort of anomaly, or we're crossing a really busy intersection and we want to have like the redundancy of a pilot supervising it, that product's already built and works really well. And the other thing I'll say is, like, if you want to train this autonomy system, you need a lot of data. And so our intuition was always like, well, let's build inexpensive hardware, let's build a really good product for teleoperation, and let's start scaling it up. And now we collect a ton of data in the most chaotic urban environments, possible, right? We're operating 20 hours a day in the craziest parts of the cities, in some of our busiest cities around the world. So we get a ton of data. And it's not just the video data, it's what did the human driver do? How did they interact with this? They also annotate our maps, right? So we have a real-time map of every sidewalk in every city we operate in. So I could tell you where every car is parked blocking the sidewalk, where every kind of homeless encampment is, where every construction zone, street light that's out. We record a bunch of these different events using that human operator. That also is very useful training data, because you do need to know a real-time map of the infrastructure to be able to navigate the city well, right? We're not primarily using roads, and so that same infrastructure that exists for road conditions and real-time updates on that doesn't really exist on the sidewalk. So we had to create that. But once you have that sort of data collection engine built into the company, autonomy becomes much easier to roll out, because you have all this as training data, and you have the ability to pull back in the driver to complete any of these data points, narrate what's happening, confirm that it is indeed a blockage, et cetera, right? You're always going to want to use them. You just want to be very efficient at how you use the human operator.
What is the ratio of human operator to robots in the field?
So the way we look at it is, you basically want one operator to be supervising, multiple at a time. And so it varies depending on the city, depending on how mature that market is, how much data we have on that market, right? Helsinki looks very different than Los Angeles and Miami. We've started collecting snow data just this last winter. Was the first time we actually had serious snow data, right? Chicago and Helsinki. So it depends on the market, but the idea is at some points you have one driver driving a robot 100% of the time in certain conditions, and other times they might be supervising multiple at a time. And I think this is also maybe an underappreciated part of why this form factor vehicle can become so low cost quickly. If you have an operator watching 3 robots at a time, for example, that's still fully supervised autonomy. But that's a huge efficiency gain for us, right? That's 3 orders happening simultaneously with one person. And then you go to 4 robots at a time, 5 robots at a time. At some point you can't supervise more than, 4 or 5 at a time, or there's just too many feeds to watch. But if you're traveling at 5, 6, 7, 8 miles an hour and you're watching, 3 feeds at a time, it's still supervised. So you can still be on top of catching kind of false negatives where it might miss something that it was supposed to stop for. So you have a very high engagement rate with the pilot, but you're still getting a lot of the economic benefit. That helps train the system even faster, and then you can improve that ratio. And then you have really good data to say, we're happy with our false negative and our false positive rate, to the point where we are happy to staff 1 to 10. And then, in these domains, we can be a little bit more lights out. So that's what we're working towards. That'll be a kind of a continuous evolution for the whole company's history, I'm sure, because you're never going to be fully lights out, no humans. It doesn't make any sense. But the goal is just to be really efficient without impacting delivery times, and while being having a very safe operation. The last thing I'll add there is, this is also, I think, underappreciated. If you're trying to deliver 2 miles and you're traveling, 10 miles an hour or less, you're very, very sensitive to any downtime, right? You do not want to stop. And you do not want to have to reroute. So it's not just that, is the vehicle capable of getting from A to B autonomously? Is it capable of getting from A to B as fast as possible? And your tolerance for any hit to speed or time spent stopped waiting for an operator to come in and fix something or making a mistake, that cost is super high. So you want to be very thoughtful about rolling out autonomy in a way that has, does not impact your delivery times. And in this world, it's not really your average delivery times. It's really about your 90th percentile or your 99th percentile delivery times. So you want to say, okay, in the worst kind of conditions, on the hardest delivery we do that day, how delayed was it because of autonomy? And the answer can't be 20 minutes. That's a canceled order. That's a terrible experience. We've failed that, and we shouldn't have released it.
Is the goal to get to full autonomy where you say have an intervention every 100,000 miles, every 500,000 miles, and that way you can truly scale the business globally?
For sure. I mean, the goal is always going to be to have as few interventions as possible and have the system run at a very high level of autonomy. So that I think that's going to be the goal for any of these companies. I think, point I'm trying to make is you get a ton of economic benefit along the way, and that end state is not going to be too economically different than having like a 1 to 20 or a 1 to 30 or 1 to 50 ratio where you have one person who's kind of supervising or responsible for 50 different vehicles at a time, or 50 vehicles where they're kind of coming in and completing tasks. I mean, that's getting pretty low cost, and that human interaction has a ton of value to our system. So maybe eventually it gets good enough where you don't have to do that, but I think you're always going to want a human in the loop for some things. So I think it'll be a continuous journey to get there, but that human feedback is incredibly important.
It helps your system learn. And then over time, as your autonomy stack gets, let's call it, more and more mature, do you ever see a new business emerge where perhaps you license that technology? Your competitor, Swerve Robotics, is now licensing it to Magna. Do you get to a point where perhaps you license your stack as well to, say, a Continental or a Bosch?
The closest thing we have to that, we're not licensing anything per se, but we do have a partnership with OpenAI. So we're working with OpenAI to develop next gen models for self-driving. Right, they're very interested, obviously, in getting their large text or image, video, their multimodal models actually doing useful things in the real world. The real world has a lot more data than the internet, and they're very interested in how do we make our models useful in the real world so that they can do useful things, but also improve the models generally. And I think we've seen from these large models, making it better at any new task makes it better at all tasks. And so that partnership's really cool because we're exploring, how do we get these models into the real world? Are they useful? What's required to make them useful? And can we kind of work together to make them better? So that's still very early stages of that partnership, but we have a lot of data and a lot of human annotation on that data, as I pointed out. And in kind of the most diverse situations, I think a lot of AV companies have usually been California, Arizona, good weather deployments, but we have very bad weather deployments. I mean, we have now Miami and Helsinki, Chicago, so you're getting a pretty big contrast in that data. And how does a human operator navigate those most critical areas where our autonomy algorithm cannot succeed? And so can we work together by having a model running on the vehicle and a more cloud-based larger model? Can those work together to solve some of the hardest driving scenarios? And I think that's a really interesting part of robotics to explore.
It's a very interesting part. Do you potentially see the OpenAI data set merging with your data set to build an autonomous driving stack perhaps in the future?
So one of the thoughts we had is if these models keep getting smarter and smarter as they have seeming to do every 6 months, they just seem way more capable. And you have to play that trend out. There's a very real possibility that these models can drive a robot or drive a car super well. They're trained on the entirety of the internet. These companies are spending tens of billions of dollars to do this. There is an arms race across all of big tech. So this is unprecedented stuff, and the models are just getting better and better. We haven't really seen the capabilities plateau. So it's not a certainty, but we do want to be very thoughtful of where we're spending our time, where we're spending our energy with that trend line looking the way it does. So if those models become super capable, right, we want to know, we want to be the first to know, we want to be the first to integrate it, and we want to be the first to use that to make the service better for our customers. I think we're quite a ways away from those models being able to fit on the device and drive them, right? We're not going to put tens of thousands of dollars of compute on these vehicles. That's not going to happen. So you're always going to need some combination of a custom stack that runs at a high frequency on the robot. But I think being able to use these larger models in the cloud, I think is going to be really powerful.
It's going to be very interesting because I've read papers and scientific debates around using the Meta Llama models potentially to power an autonomous driving. Obviously, we see what Alphabet and Waymo are doing. There's probably some deep mind in that code. We saw the Emma paper, so there is clearly a path there. From you're right, you're not going to load a bunch of NVIDIA GPUs on these things and say, "Giddy up, here you go," because I'm going to use a term. You're going to get a cowboy that's going to pick them up and steal them and rip the GPUs out of them because of the value there. And perhaps they end up on some crypto mining farm. Is the onboard compute, are you running low power ARM chips on there? Or what are you running for the onboard compute today?
We're using the NVIDIA Jetson boards. They're super low power. It's got unified memory across the GPU and the CPU. It's super low power, but it's really capable. I mean, those boards are getting really good. The first gen vehicle we had all had the Xavier boards, and now they have the Orin boards, and it's super capable. They're low power, low cost. So we'll plan to continue to use that line, but yeah, then you want to be able to selectively say, okay, I'm crossing this 12 lanes of traffic in Chicago, and the lights are out, and it's a storm, and I can't really see very much. Am I safe to cross now? Right, a question like that, our model might not have the capacity to answer that, and a very large cloud-based model that's been trained on all of YouTube or something might have some patterns that are relevant there, things to look for, ways to do risk assessment, and so I think I would be surprised if the future doesn't go in this direction. All of our models are also trained end to end. So we just take all of the video data and all of the maps data and then all of the pilot data, which is both, any voice narration they do, any annotation they do, combined with their trajectory that they drove. And we just train a model end to end to say video in, output the next, 10 actions. And so that fits really well into this paradigm, because now these kind of architectures and these strategies are all kind of merging, right? Because that also just looks like tokens in, tokens out. And so I think as these kind of paradigms merge, the LLM paradigm with the self-driving paradigm, I think we're well on our way to do that. Then I think the advances in one will continue to benefit the other. So I think that's going to be really exciting. And there's unprecedented amount of spend and research going into this right now. So it's an exciting time to be in robotics. It's going to change very quickly.
It's a very exciting time. How many hours would you estimate a day or a week are you putting into the model?
We retrain, we don't typically just retrain on everything, or we'll retrain on the kind of hardest examples or where disengagement happened, or, we have a bunch of tools to query the fleet to say what's interesting. So I don't know. It's the probably in the tens of thousands, if I had to guess, something like that. I mean, we're training these things on millions of hours.
If you look at your OpenAI partnership, you're training on millions of hours. That gives OpenAI potentially a way to counter Alphabet's VO product, because they're training that off of YouTube data. Perhaps they could train off of your and put a video product out. So not only can you create a better self-driving car, they could potentially create a competitor to Alphabet, which where this all goes is it's getting really, really interesting. We're going to see all types of different mergers evolve, different models evolve, but end to end, as you clearly know, is the future of where this is going. On the hardware side, so your model scaling on the software side. On the hardware side, who's manufacturing the robots today?
So the generation you see on the road now, we call Coco One. Coco One was made with a couple of different CMs. The one we talked about is Segway 9bot. So we partnered with them. This was back in 2021. We partnered with them because they made like all the scooters. And so the idea was let's capitalize on the supply chain that got created to support millions of scooters and all of the R&D that went into making that a very reliable outdoor, power electronics. So that was the idea, that we made that base with them, the kind of chassis with them. And then we basically just made this big injection molded tub where we mounted all the components. So we have over 1,000 of those. And we're making the next gen vehicle right now. We haven't talked about who the partner is yet, although I'm sure we will soon in the future. But we're probably going to make next year, probably going to make about 10,000 of those. It's going to be similar. It's going to be the usual things like fewer parts, easier supply chain to manage for repairs, right? If I have a fleet all over Europe and the US, you don't want to manage like hundreds or thousands of parts. You want kind of more vertically integrated, simplified electronics. All the kind of basic stuff. Once you get to a little bit more scale, you would just build things to be a little bit easier to manage on the supply chain front. And then, better suspension, faster, but directionally, it's going to look pretty similar. We're pretty happy with the current vehicle we have. We just need more of them, and then there's a bunch of stuff we can improve if you're starting from scratch.
2025, you have 1,000 today. 2026, you're going to 10,000. So we're looking at a 9,000 bot scale in next year.
Yeah, we'll see the exact ramp rate. I think 10,000 by the end of the year. So we'll see how many we actually can get deployed and operationalized in that time frame. But yeah, that's like roughly what we're looking at here. We have way more demand than supply right now. We're completely supply constrained on the number of vehicles. So we're trying to put out vehicles as fast as physically possible. We have like a whole. We're doing a lot of assembly in Los Angeles right now to try to get more out. So we have like a full tent. Our whole parking lot's fully tented up, trying to push out more vehicles. So it's all hand on deck to get more supply hours out. But yeah, we'll be that next gen vehicle will arrive kind of early next year.
How do you put them into the market? So you're in Chicago, you're in Los Angeles, you're in Miami. Obviously, you and I both know that there's more markets coming. When you get that 10,000, how do you deploy them in the market? And then where do they go to sleep at night? Where do you have to set up operations and depots in each city, or how does that look like? And how does it work?
So we've spent a ton of time making sure that the business, like the core unit economics, are profitable today and profitable in the new city. So we make money on all of our deliveries. We have a like fundamentally profitable business model today. We're not waiting for hardware costs to come down or anything like that. The vehicles are inexpensive, and the total cost of ownership is really low. And so we got that model working in Los Angeles, but we all live here and we have an office here it's also a warehouse. So it's a little bit more straightforward to do. So then when you open up new markets, we basically start by partnering with what we would call like anchor merchants. So these might be merchants like larger enterprise merchants. It could be like a ghost kitchen company, could be like a grocery store. And so we will actually ship the vehicles to them first into a new market. They will store them, they will charge them, they will clean them, they will do basic maintenance. We will store the spare parts there. Going back to Coco 2s to make sure that spare part number and cost is as low as possible because you do have to store it locally. So we will ship all that there, and then they get dispatched from that anchor merchant. Then we'll start mapping the area, get ready for operations, make sure we understand how to get from A to B super reliably. We understand all the quirks of the city. Once that mapping process is complete, we'll start doing those orders for that anchor merchant. And then we'll start onboarding the merchants in the surrounding areas and then expanding from there. And then, as you start getting more and more merchants, you need more storage locations, more charging depots, et cetera. So, but we try to do this mostly with merchant partners. If there's an area where we don't have a merchant partner we can do this with, we will rent parking spaces from the city or from a business. We will put a storage pod there, and the robots will go back there at night to charge, store spare parts, right? You basically want this like mini depot at the kind of neighborhood level, so the vehicles do not have to be moving around the city.
So if you look at, let's use LA. I lived there half my life. You're based there, and LA is vast. So do we have a hub, say, in Brentwood by the Country Mart? You have another one in, say, downtown Venice, and perhaps you have one somewhere in the Golden Triangle in Beverly Hills. And so is that how you kind of map them out?
Yeah, so they'll there's a Santa Monica one, there's West LA one, like kind of near the 405.
Mm-hmm.
We have a West Hollywood one, Hollywood, downtown, mid city. So all the kind of major hubs will have a place where the robots can go back to, so they don't have to get transported around the city. I mean, going downtown to Venice could be like 2 hours at the wrong time of day. So you want to minimize any of that transportation. So you want to do repairs, maintenance, all of that. You want to do it as close as possible to where those vehicles are deployed. You want to have them be kind of charged without a lot of human involvement. And then you want them clean, right? Like they're not. You want to store them in a way where they're not going to get dirty, and you don't have to go clean it every morning. You want them to be clean and presentable. because they are delivering food. So it's important that they look good. Um, so we work with a lot of our merchant partners to make sure that that stuff's complete, right? Vehicles clean, vehicles charged, vehicles out on the curb. Um, this is, I think, an important and underappreciated part of the hardware design as well. Um, Making it smaller makes all of this way easier and cheaper, right? The larger the vehicle is, the more complex a lot of this stuff is to do. And then obviously, if you have a full size car, then you can kind of have the vehicle drive around a larger zone and traverse the whole city. But as I've pointed out, going to a full size car, I don't think is the right form factor for urban deliveries.
No, it's not. And on that front, we talked about restaurants, but another category that you're very involved with is grocery. And for grocery stores, they have parking lots and they have the trucks go in. So perhaps back where the delivery bay is, you could potentially see a pod going there. It just goes right into their operations.
Yeah, we have an example of that. We have grocery stores are a perfect fit for that because they usually have a lot of real estate. And yeah, grocery has been a very fast growing category for us. Uh, like I said, the vehicles fit about 4 grocery bags, which I think is the perfect size because as you get much larger than that, the economics of grocery delivery start becoming pretty good. Right? Someone orders like $300 of groceries, charging them $15, $20 for a delivery fee is not the end of the world, but that's totally cost prohibitive if you're ordering $30 of groceries or $40 of groceries. And so I do think in the future, people would like to shop more. If you had the convenience delivery, I think people would like to shop more frequently, smaller baskets, more closer to when they're actually going to prepare the meal. It's just not affordable to do. So we really want to create a good product for those smaller trips. Grocery is also very local, right? Like most people buy from a grocery store that's in their neighborhood. So our form factor also is a really good vehicle for doing those sort of trips. And grocery stores are a great example. It's a high volume hub and spoke. It's a great example of where the size of the vehicle and the compactness of the vehicle is really important. You have a grocery store in the middle of a city, you just can't have a high volume of autonomous cars coming through it. It'll be chaos. So we can kind of manage that chaos much better with this sort of vehicle.
It fits, but you know the other thing that your bots enable with grocery stores is fresh food. I go to the grocery store every day. I drive, go there because I want to buy it fresh. But yet, if I had a delivery bot, it makes it much easier and I have more time at home. So that's an advantage there because too many individuals buy stuff full of pesticides and chemicals. Oh, it's going to last a week. Well, and your inside, it's not very good. It's sitting in there rotting. But if you can have fresh, it's lower healthcare costs. You can think better. It's just better for everybody involved. I'm a big fan of what you're building, Zach. We wish you well. I can't wait to see how you scale when you hit this 10,000 bot. And we're going to have you back on the road to autonomy next year as you scale. As you prepare to scale, obviously, as a founder and the CEO, you're thinking about the future. What is the future of Coco Robotics?
Yeah, I think right now we're really there's a lot of work to do to capture kind of this initial product offering, which is autonomous vehicle for moving goods in a city, right? That is a an enormous market, so that's going to take a lot of our attention for a while. I think uh, a stat that I say often that I think catches people off guard is uh, DoorDash reports, I think around 16 billion a year is what the kind of career earnings are on their platform. So it's like you got one company, mostly in the US, delivering mostly hot food at the current price point being that expensive, and that is generating like 16 billion in career payments. So it's a pretty insanely large market, and I think if you bring that cost down substantially, that's going to go way higher. I, you guys maybe have a better analysis on this than me, but I would assume like if you include the rest of the US, all the companies in the US and Europe, you're probably, I don't know, 40 to 50 billion dollars of career payments for moving food and groceries. So we want to really drive the cost way down, get the cost per delivery to be really low, so that's more affordable for people. And that's going to take a lot of vehicles. It's going to take a lot of countries. So we're really focused on that. But I think once you do that, there's a lot of opportunity for if you have these automated vehicles in the cities, there's a lot of ways to benefit the community, to benefit the cities, to transport all types of goods, retail goods, pharmacy goods, and offer all of those at an ultra low cost. So I think we'll be focused on that North Star of making things much more accessible to people. But there's a lot of work to do that.
There's a lot of work to do, but what we do know is that robot delivery is a growing market. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is Coco Robotics. Zach, thank you so much for coming on the road to autonomy today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Grayson.